The doors to the sprawling, glass-walled boardroom swung open with the controlled grace of carefully choreographed theater, and Ashford Montgomery strode in, instantly silencing the low murmurs of executives awaiting him. The man's presence was magnetic, his strikingly handsome features unreadable, dark blue eyes coldly assessing everyone in attendance. Power radiated from every inch of him, from his broad shoulders perfectly framed by a tailored Italian suit, to the poised authority in his piercing gaze that spoke louder than any words. Ashford had always been in complete control, capable of commanding any room simply by entering it. But today was different. Today, beneath his mask of confidence, he felt a quiet but unmistakable tension. "Gentlemen," he began, voice crisp and authoritative, "I'm fully aware of why we're here. As you know, my grandfather's will has presented us with an unusual stipulation." He placed his hands on the polished surface of the expansive mahogany table, meeting each board member's probing gaze. "My grandfather's terms state that in order to inherit my full shares and secure the future of Montgomery Enterprises, I must marry within 30 days. If I fail, my shares will be liquidated, and control of the company will shift entirely to the board. You all know the catastrophic consequences of that." The silence that followed his words was heavy, suffocating. Nobody challenged him, they all knew too well the chaos that losing Ashford's iron-handed leadership would bring. Yet beneath their quiet submission lay an unspoken skepticism. They knew Ashford Montgomery, the man who calculated every risk, anticipated every outcome, and never let personal relationships interfere with his empire. They wondered if the notoriously aloof CEO could really enter a marriage, even for convenience, without disaster following close behind. After the meeting adjourned, Ashford sank into the leather chair at the head of the table, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. He felt a headache throbbing at his temples. He had considered every possibility but knew there was only one practical solution: find a suitable bride, enter into a carefully controlled contract marriage, and maintain control over his legacy. Love wasn't an option, he neither had the time nor the inclination to chase romantic illusions. His life had always revolved around cold, rational decisions, and this arrangement would be no different. After all, marriage was simply another business transaction, a calculated choice designed to secure his power. But who? His gaze fell upon a small stack of files, each one carefully curated by his personal assistant, Harrison. Profiles of eligible women, chosen specifically because they were discreet, unattached, and wouldn't disrupt his carefully ordered life. The names blurred together: socialites, heiresses, and women who understood the benefits of marrying a powerful man without expecting emotional entanglements. And yet, each file he skimmed only deepened his unease. Ashford was meticulous and cautious, never rushed into decisions. This choice should have been easy. Yet every option left him feeling oddly empty. Frustrated, he pushed the stack aside, rising abruptly to his feet. He paced to the glass wall overlooking the glittering city skyline. The city he had conquered, the empire he had built, everything was now hanging by the thin thread of this marriage. His jaw clenched as he stared out into the late afternoon glow, deep in thought. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the tense silence. He glanced down. Harrison. Answering curtly, he listened as his assistant presented another candidate, someone he'd overlooked before. Victoria Hart. Young, beautiful, and, most importantly, desperate. Harrison explained she was the daughter of Benjamin Hart, whose once wealthy empire had recently collapsed into bankruptcy following disastrous investments. Her family's situation was dire, they needed the security only Ashford could provide. Victoria would likely accept a businesslike marriage without protest, considering it a way to rescue her family from financial ruin. "Arrange a meeting," Ashford finally said, voice clipped, resolute. "Immediately." 3 days later, Victoria Hart stood nervously in his office. Ashford had met her briefly years before, at a fundraiser gala, but he'd barely paid attention. Now he studied her closely. She was undeniably beautiful, but more understated than the women he usually encountered, soft-spoken, reserved, her delicate features holding a calm dignity that hinted at hidden strength. Her dark, wavy hair was pulled back into a simple style, her clothing tasteful yet unassuming. She wasn't glamorous by conventional standards, but something about her quiet grace intrigued him deeply. "Mr. Montgomery," she began softly, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her dark brown eyes, "I understand this arrangement is purely business. I'm willing to sign your contract on one condition." He arched a brow, intrigued by her unexpected boldness. Few dared negotiate with him. "Name your terms," he replied evenly, folding his arms across his chest. "My younger brother, Ethan, is critically ill. I'm sure you already know that. The treatments he needs are expensive and require immediate payment. My condition is simple. The day we sign the marriage papers, you transfer enough money to cover all his medical bills. Once that's done, I'm yours to command. I'll play my part however you see fit." Ashford studied her, taken aback by her straightforwardness. He had expected demands for wealth or luxury, perhaps a large settlement for her personal benefit. Instead, Victoria had asked only for help in saving someone else. Something inside him stirred uncomfortably, an odd sensation he couldn't quite identify. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing as he watched her closely. "Consider it done," he agreed, voice softer than intended. Her visible relief touched something deep within him, unsettling him further. Within days, contracts were signed, money transferred, and Ethan was moved to a private medical facility, receiving the best care possible. The marriage date approached quickly, and both Ashford and Victoria maintained a carefully polite distance, neither comfortable enough to approach anything resembling genuine intimacy. Until, finally, their wedding day arrived, a lavish yet emotionless event held under the watchful eyes of business elites eager to witness the union. The ceremony was brief, perfunctory, held in the grand ballroom of a renowned luxury hotel. Ashford stood stiffly at the altar, expression unreadable, as Victoria walked toward him, her eyes carefully downcast. The vows were simple, spoken quietly, their words empty of emotion or intimacy. The obligatory kiss at the end was cold, brief, a mere brush of lips intended solely for show. But something changed in that moment. As Ashford leaned in, his eyes locked briefly with hers, and he glimpsed a flicker of vulnerability beneath her carefully maintained composure. For the briefest moment, he wondered if he'd misjudged her, misjudged this entire situation. That night, alone in their suite, Ashford approached her with a mixture of obligation and uncertainty. But as he gently reached for her, Victoria's eyes betrayed a truth he'd never anticipated. Trembling beneath his touch, she softly confessed she had never been with anyone. His heart jolted violently, surprise rippling through him. He stared into her vulnerable gaze, a million questions crowding his mind, and realized this marriage, which had started as a mere business transaction, had suddenly changed. "You never told me," he whispered, his voice filled with unexpected tenderness. She shook her head, eyes shimmering with quiet tears. Would it have mattered? For the first time, Ashford understood the weight of their arrangement, the fragile trust she had placed in him. He realized with startling clarity that nothing about this marriage could remain simply transactional. Victoria was not just a means to an end, she was now his responsibility, and he could no longer ignore the sudden, protective surge he felt towards her. The CEO who never let emotion cloud his judgment had just been blindsided by the woman who was, legally, his wife. In that single, vulnerable moment, Ashford knew that his carefully ordered world had just begun unraveling. But rather than alarm him, the thought filled him with a strange sense of wonder. He had entered this marriage expecting a simple business arrangement. Instead, he was confronted with the possibility of something he'd spent a lifetime denying, the terrifying yet undeniable truth that perhaps love was waiting for him in the least expected of places. The morning after their wedding, Victoria awoke alone, sunlight filtering softly through the sheer curtains of their opulent bedroom. She sat up slowly, the silk sheets pooling gently around her waist as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings of her new life. The luxurious room, tastefully decorated with modern furnishings and muted shades of silver and charcoal, felt cold and impersonal despite its grandeur. Though she now officially carried the Montgomery name, she felt utterly out of place. The vast bed beside her was already empty. Maxwell had disappeared long before dawn, leaving behind only the lingering trace of his cologne and an empty side of the mattress as evidence he'd even been there at all. A sinking feeling washed over her. Victoria had known what she was signing up for, an impersonal, contract-bound marriage to secure her family's future. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the acute loneliness she felt now, waking up as a newlywed bride yet completely abandoned. Still, she reminded herself firmly, this wasn't meant to be romantic. They were husband and wife only on paper, a carefully constructed facade for the benefit of their families, investors, and the media. Feelings had never been part of the agreement. She slipped from bed, pulling a silk robe around her slender frame and padded barefoot toward the spacious, marble-accented bathroom. She caught her reflection in the enormous mirror, taking in the pale, uncertain face staring back at her. A quiet sadness clouded her dark eyes. The memory of last night lingered heavily, and she felt warmth rise to her cheeks as she recalled the unexpected tenderness Maxwell had shown when he realized her secret. It was a moment of raw vulnerability she'd not intended to share. Yet now, in the stark light of morning, she feared she had shown him too much, allowed him a glimpse of her true self, a self she'd meant to keep carefully hidden. The silence in the apartment felt oppressive. Victoria wandered cautiously down the corridor, eventually finding her way into the elegant kitchen where breakfast was already laid out by an invisible housekeeper. Everything was beautifully arranged, coffee in fine porcelain cups, fresh fruit in delicate crystal bowls, pastries she barely recognized from expensive bakeries she'd never stepped foot into. Yet despite the luxuries surrounding her, Victoria felt the space was sterile and cold, devoid of warmth or personality. This was Maxwell's home, not hers, a penthouse suite designed for a powerful, emotionless man who saw the world in shades of business and profit margins. She sat quietly at the kitchen island, picking absently at a pastry, wondering if Maxwell even planned to acknowledge her existence today. But before she could fully indulge her self-pity, a subtle sound startled her from her thoughts. The front door swung open, revealing Maxwell in the entryway, looking impeccably put together in his tailored suit and polished shoes. He paused at the sight of her sitting there, clearly surprised to find her awake. "You're up," he said curtly, though his eyes flickered over her with something more complex than simple indifference. For a brief second, Victoria thought she glimpsed an unguarded softness beneath his calculated exterior. But then, just as quickly, the mask returned. "We have to attend a charity event tonight. My assistant already prepared a suitable outfit for you. Be ready at 6 sharp." Victoria nodded slowly, unsure how else to respond. She knew their marriage would entail public appearances, events, forced smiles for cameras, and pretending they were a happy couple. But she wasn't prepared for how easily Maxwell switched back into his role as the distant CEO, as though their brief moment of vulnerability last night had never happened. Throughout the day, Victoria wandered the penthouse restlessly, exploring the vast rooms, the walls decorated with expensive but impersonal artwork. She found no trace of warmth, no personal mementos, no photographs, just cold, sterile elegance. Eventually, she retreated to her room, struggling to quell the growing ache of loneliness inside her. She missed her brother Ethan deeply and wondered if he was comfortable at the expensive treatment facility Maxwell had arranged. Guilt gnawed at her heart. Ethan was safe now, yet she felt trapped, isolated in her gilded cage. As evening approached, Victoria prepared herself for the charity event. She selected an elegant gown from the collection Maxwell had provided, the shimmering fabric hugging her figure gracefully. Despite the luxurious feel, the gown felt strangely like armor, something to shield her from prying eyes, a mask to hide her true emotions. She carefully applied makeup, her trembling fingers revealing the nervousness she refused to admit. When she finally emerged from the room, Maxwell stood waiting near the door, eyes unreadable as they swept over her. "You look stunning," he said quietly, voice holding a controlled politeness. Yet, beneath that cool exterior, Victoria sensed the heat of his gaze, the slight tightening of his jaw. It sent an unexpected flutter through her chest, which she immediately suppressed. He offered his arm without another word, escorting her toward the waiting limousine outside. Throughout the ride, neither spoke. Victoria stared resolutely out the tinted windows, fighting the urge to glance at Maxwell. She could feel him watching her, could sense his eyes tracing every line of her face and form, yet he remained silent. Only when they arrived at the venue did he lean toward her slightly, voice low and controlled. "Stay close to me tonight. We need to appear united." She nodded wordlessly, her heart pounding. Together, they stepped from the limousine into the glare of camera flashes and hushed whispers. Society's elite had gathered for the charity gala, many eager for a glimpse of the famously reclusive Maxwell Montgomery and his mysterious bride. Victoria forced herself to smile politely, nodding graciously as introductions were made, the weight of Maxwell's arm around her waist both comforting and confusing. Midway through the evening, however, Victoria felt suddenly overwhelmed by the swirl of questions, intrusive gazes, and whispers about their marriage. She excused herself quietly, slipping onto a balcony for fresh air. Standing alone in the cold night breeze, Victoria pressed a trembling hand to her chest, breathing slowly to calm herself. She hadn't expected the scrutiny to be so intense, nor had she expected to feel so lonely beside the powerful man who was her husband in name only. "Victoria." The low, rich timbre of Maxwell's voice startled her. Turning, she found him standing close, concern evident in his eyes. For once, he made no attempt to hide it. Without thinking, she blurted, "I don't think I can do this. Not if it means pretending to feel things I don't." Maxwell stepped closer, his expression unreadable in the half-shadowed terrace. He reached out slowly, fingertips grazing her arm gently, sending a shockwave of warmth through her body. "This isn't easy for me either," he admitted quietly, his voice rough with unspoken emotion. "I didn't expect this to feel real." His words hung between them, shattering the illusion of a purely business arrangement. Victoria met his gaze, searching for sincerity, for honesty beneath his carefully constructed facade. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, trapping her gently between the stone railing and his body, his gaze intense, unguarded. "I thought marrying you would be simple. A practical deal. But last night changed things. Seeing you, knowing you trusted me with something so vulnerable, I didn't expect that. I can't pretend anymore, Victoria." She stared at him, heart racing. Was he truly confessing feelings, or was this another calculated move? "What do you want from me, Maxwell?" He stepped closer, voice barely a whisper. "I want a chance. A real chance to know you. Not as a contract bride, but as you truly are. I want this marriage to become something real." Victoria hesitated, torn between caution and the desperate yearning she'd secretly harbored from the moment they'd met. Slowly, bravely, she nodded, allowing herself to lean gently into his touch. Beneath the stars, on that cold terrace, they stood together, two souls who'd started in a calculated marriage, realizing with shock and tenderness that perhaps fate had planned something far deeper and infinitely more dangerous, the possibility of true love. The following morning, a subtle change settled over the penthouse. It was no longer just a place of calculated silence and distant politeness, something else had begun to grow within its cold, elegant walls. Victoria moved around the apartment quietly, her thoughts tangled in confusion and anticipation. Maxwell's unexpected admission the night before still echoed vividly in her mind, causing her heart to flutter anxiously every time she replayed his softly spoken words. Could a man who had orchestrated their marriage purely for business truly be capable of genuine affection? As she sipped her coffee in the gleaming, marble-tiled kitchen, she found herself contemplating the complicated reality she now inhabited. She knew Maxwell as a ruthless businessman, unyielding and fiercely disciplined. Yet the Maxwell she had seen last night was completely different, vulnerable, sincere, and perhaps even a little lost. She shook her head slightly, forcing herself back to reality. Falling for him was a dangerous luxury she couldn't afford, not when their arrangement still hung heavily between them. Meanwhile, Maxwell struggled equally with the newfound vulnerability Victoria had awakened in him. He sat behind his massive desk at Montgomery Enterprises, staring blankly at the quarterly reports he'd barely glanced at. His focus was completely fractured, a rarity for the ruthless CEO known for razor-sharp concentration. Instead of numbers and market predictions, his thoughts kept drifting back to Victoria. Her innocent surprise at his confession, the cautious hope in her eyes, every detail replayed endlessly in his head, distracting him from the day's pressing agenda. Eventually, unable to bear the uncertainty, Maxwell left the office early, instructing his secretary to cancel the rest of the day's appointments. He returned home earlier than usual, his pulse quickening in a way that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the woman waiting there. Entering the penthouse, he found Victoria seated in the living room, absorbed in a book, her long dark hair cascading softly around her shoulders, illuminated by the fading afternoon sunlight. She looked up sharply at his unexpected arrival, surprise evident in her dark eyes. "You're home early," she murmured softly, unsure of how to approach this unfamiliar intimacy. "I couldn't concentrate," Maxwell admitted, surprising even himself with the honesty of his reply. He moved closer, studying her carefully. "I thought maybe we could spend some time together, away from everything else." Victoria hesitated only a moment before nodding slowly. "I'd like that." In a gesture that shocked them both, Maxwell reached out and gently took her hand, guiding her toward the living room couch. They sat together, the silence stretching comfortably around them as they searched for the right words. Victoria broke the silence first. "You really surprised me last night," she began hesitantly, avoiding his gaze. "I didn't think you were capable of saying those things." "I didn't either," he admitted quietly, reaching out to gently tilt her chin upward, forcing her to look at him. "But ever since we married, things have been different. I never planned on caring about you, Victoria. But now, I find myself drawn to you in ways I don't fully understand." His sincere confession left her breathless. Her eyes widened slightly, heart pounding painfully. "Why me?" she asked softly, genuinely perplexed. "You could have married anyone, someone glamorous, someone used to your world." "That's exactly why," he interrupted, his thumb tracing her cheekbone softly. "You're not like them. You're honest, sincere, and genuine. You make me see things differently. You make me want to be different. That scares me." Victoria's breath hitched softly at his words. No man had ever spoken to her like this, with vulnerability hidden behind layers of power. But she couldn't shake the fear that lingered in the back of her mind. "I'm afraid too, Maxwell," she whispered honestly. "Afraid of believing you, afraid this might all disappear. I know this is still supposed to be temporary." Maxwell's gaze darkened, and his voice became firmer, fiercely protective. "Forget the contract," he insisted urgently. "This stopped being temporary for me the moment I realized I didn't want to wake up without you by my side." The intensity of his confession stole her breath away. Yet doubt lingered stubbornly in her heart. She had watched men break promises before, her father, her ex-boyfriend, people she trusted. How could Maxwell, the famously ruthless businessman, be different? "What if I'm not enough?" she whispered, eyes glistening. "What if you regret this?" He cupped her face gently, leaning closer until their foreheads touched. "I could never regret you," he murmured. "Trust me." Her breathing quickened, pulse racing as she closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Maxwell's heart pounded wildly. This closeness, the tenderness of this quiet moment, was something he'd never experienced. He had always viewed love as a weakness, a vulnerability exploited by enemies. Yet, with Victoria, vulnerability felt like strength. Hours later, as twilight fell across the penthouse, they sat side by side on the expansive sofa. Maxwell had discarded his usual jacket and tie, sleeves rolled casually to his elbows, looking far less the intimidating CEO and more like a man genuinely in love. Victoria studied him thoughtfully, daring to believe, if only briefly, that the warmth she saw in his eyes was real. "Can I ask you something personal?" Maxwell finally broke the comfortable silence. She nodded, heart tightening slightly. "Of course. Why did you never, he struggled for words, rare uncertainty crossing his features. "Before we married. Why were you still a virgin?" she finished for him, smiling gently, though a blush colored her cheeks. "It wasn't something I planned, exactly. Life happened. Ethan's illness happened. Every moment became dedicated to him. Relationships weren't a priority." She paused, then quietly added, "And I guess I always believed my first time should mean something special, even though I knew our marriage was supposed to be just a contract." Maxwell felt an intense rush of both pride and guilt. He had married her expecting only a business partner, but instead he had taken something sacred from her. The realization tightened his chest painfully. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice heavy with sincerity. "I never meant to make your sacrifice feel meaningless." "It doesn't," she assured him softly, reaching for his hand. "Not anymore." Maxwell gently squeezed her fingers, holding on as though afraid she might vanish. Sitting together in the softly lit apartment, silence enveloped them once more, but this time it was peaceful, filled with mutual understanding and the cautious promise of something new. In that quiet space, Maxwell's heart felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about stocks, profits, or the power plays that defined his existence. Instead, his entire world seemed focused on the woman who had quietly dismantled every barrier he had erected around his heart. Victoria, for her part, felt a cautious but deepening hope. She had entered the marriage expecting nothing, yet now she found herself wanting everything: love, closeness, sincerity. Looking up into Maxwell's eyes, she dared to believe this fragile moment might lead to something lasting. Something real. Something powerful enough to change their carefully constructed lives forever. Neither of them knew the storm of challenges still waiting on the horizon, nor the forces determined to tear them apart. But at that moment, in each other's embrace, both decided silently that whatever came next, they would face it together. The weeks following Maxwell's surprising confession brought an unexpected shift in their relationship. What had begun as an emotionless arrangement gradually evolved into something much warmer, tender, and quietly profound. Though they had yet to fully surrender their hearts to each other, the cool, polite distance that once defined their interactions slowly gave way to small gestures of warmth and kindness that left Victoria breathless with cautious hope. Maxwell, once so guarded, now appeared each evening at their penthouse genuinely eager to see her, to hear about her day, or simply to share quiet moments together, something she never imagined possible when she agreed to their contract marriage. One crisp winter evening, as snow gently dusted the city, Maxwell announced that they were invited to an exclusive gala celebrating Montgomery Enterprises' latest charitable initiative. Victoria had grown used to the rhythm of attending such events at his side, but tonight was different. Tonight Maxwell had made it clear he wanted her there not as his contractual wife, but as his true partner. He had personally selected a stunning gown for her, deep emerald green, delicate silk hugging her slender form. When Victoria slipped into it, her heart raced. The gown felt intensely personal, as if Maxwell had chosen it to reveal something he saw in her that she'd never noticed herself. Maxwell stood near the door of their suite, breath hitching subtly as she emerged from the bedroom. He seemed momentarily speechless, his typically composed face betraying admiration. "You look breathtaking," he murmured softly, his eyes darkening with appreciation as they swept over her figure. Victoria felt a warmth spread to her cheeks, her pulse quickening under his intense gaze. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. "You have wonderful taste." Maxwell stepped forward, gently taking her hand, his thumb brushing softly over her knuckles. "The dress suits you perfectly," he said, his voice lower, intimate. But it's not the gown that makes you beautiful, Victoria, it's who you are beneath it. Her pulse quickened, a blush warming her cheeks as she met his sincere eyes. No longer able to hold back, Maxwell leaned forward, softly pressing his lips to her forehead, a brief yet deeply meaningful gesture. Victoria closed her eyes, savoring the warmth of his touch, the closeness she'd secretly longed for since the day they married. Maxwell withdrew slowly, reluctance clear in his lingering touch. When they arrived at the gala, the grand ballroom glittered with the city's most influential figures, powerful men and glamorous women mingling in elegant clusters. As Maxwell guided Victoria through the throng, his protective hand resting gently on the small of her back, whispers erupted around them. Gossip rippled outward, many noticing how the notoriously aloof billionaire CEO had suddenly transformed, openly protective, possessive, entirely attentive to the beautiful, mysterious young woman by his side. Victoria felt countless eyes scrutinizing her, whispers trailing their every move. She stiffened, anxiety surging as she remembered the cold, judgmental stares she had always endured as the outsider in this exclusive world. Yet, Maxwell tightened his hold on her waist, leaning close to whisper soothingly in her ear, "Ignore them. Tonight, there's only us." She relaxed into his embrace, drawing strength from his steady presence. This was a man the world viewed as ruthless, distant, inaccessible. Yet here, holding her close amidst the glittering lights, he seemed fiercely protective, tender in a way that shattered the world's perception of him. Victoria's heartbeat quickened again, overwhelmed by how genuine his affection felt, even amid such a carefully curated public facade. The evening progressed smoothly until Maxwell momentarily left Victoria's side to discuss business matters with a potential partner. Alone, Victoria found herself confronted by Claudia Greystone, a powerful socialite known for her ruthless ambition and rumored former interest in Maxwell. Claudia's gaze swept disdainfully over Victoria's elegant form, a cold smirk twisting her lips. "I admire your bravery," Claudia drawled sarcastically. "It must be exhausting pretending to belong here. But then again, money is a powerful incentive." Victoria's heart sank, humiliation and anger coiling tightly in her chest. She fought the impulse to retreat, meeting Claudia's venomous stare with quiet dignity. "Our marriage may have begun as an arrangement," Victoria replied steadily, "but what we share now is real." Claudia laughed, a cruel sound drawing attention from nearby guests. "Please, Victoria. Everyone here knows you're just a convenient tool to secure his fortune. Maxwell Montgomery isn't capable of real love, he's incapable of anything beyond cold, calculated ambition." Before Victoria could respond, Maxwell's voice sliced sharply through the tension. "That's enough, Claudia." His tone was icy, commanding instant silence. Maxwell's presence immediately quieted the whispers around them, guests scattering under the weight of his disapproving glare. Stepping protectively in front of Victoria, he faced Claudia, his expression dangerously cold. "If you disrespect my wife again, I assure you, you'll regret it." Claudia paled slightly, clearly shocked by Maxwell's fierce defense of the woman she dismissed as insignificant. She nodded stiffly before hastily excusing herself. Maxwell turned back to Victoria, concern softening his expression instantly. "Are you all right?" Victoria nodded slowly, heart racing from a mixture of gratitude and surprise. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, deeply touched by his protectiveness. He gently cupped her face, ignoring the curious onlookers. "No one insults you, Victoria. No one disrespects the woman I've chosen." His voice held an intensity she'd never heard before. "You mean far more to me than anyone here can imagine." Victoria's heart swelled, her resistance crumbling in the face of his genuine devotion. The rest of the night blurred into a series of polite conversations and warm smiles. Yet beneath every interaction lay the simmering intensity of Maxwell's earlier words, the quiet promise he'd whispered with fierce sincerity. The gala felt suddenly less like an obligation and more like a victory, a public declaration of something genuine growing between them. Returning home later that night, Victoria was surprised when Maxwell paused in the hallway, turning to face her with uncertainty etched into his handsome features. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice raw, "for putting you in situations where people question your worth. I never meant for you to feel like you had to justify yourself or your position at my side." "You don't need to apologize," she said softly, stepping closer to him, emboldened by the intimacy they'd shared earlier. "I chose this. And I'm not afraid anymore, Maxwell, not of the rumors or the stares. The only thing that frightens me is losing what we've found." His eyes softened instantly, and he drew her into his embrace, holding her tightly against his chest. "You won't lose me," he promised fiercely, breathing her in. "No matter what anyone else says, no matter how this began, it's become real. And I won't let anything, or anyone, take it away from us." Standing there, wrapped securely in Maxwell's strong arms, Victoria felt the last of her doubts melting away. They had started as strangers bound by a cold contract, but somewhere amid careful conversations, gentle touches, and unexpected vulnerability, they had found something precious, something worth protecting. And for the first time since their marriage began, Victoria allowed herself to fully believe in the strength of their bond, the possibility of real happiness, and a future together that stretched far beyond the confines of their original contract. In the weeks following the gala, life in the penthouse subtly transformed. The once impersonal rooms began filling with touches of Victoria's presence, her books stacked carefully beside Maxwell's sleek financial journals, fresh flowers brightening corners previously untouched, and the comforting aroma of her favorite tea wafting gently through rooms that once felt cold and sterile. Maxwell noticed every detail, quietly cherishing the changes without ever admitting how deeply they affected him. He had always considered vulnerability a weakness, yet each day Victoria's quiet presence softened his once guarded heart, making him more aware of the emptiness he'd accepted as normal before she entered his life. Their interactions grew warmer, more comfortable, marked by lingering touches and shared smiles, but something important remained unsaid between them. Both knew the significance of their growing closeness yet hesitated to openly discuss the reality that their arrangement was no longer merely contractual. Their marriage had quietly but undeniably shifted into something deeply personal, more powerful than either had imagined possible. Yet just as Victoria began allowing herself to truly believe in their newfound happiness, a sudden storm erupted, threatening everything they'd built. Early one morning, Maxwell's phone exploded with frantic notifications. Victoria watched uneasily from across their breakfast table, noticing how quickly his expression darkened from relaxed contentment to cold fury. Maxwell stood abruptly, pacing toward the expansive windows overlooking the skyline, his jaw clenched in tightly controlled anger. "What is it?" Victoria finally dared to ask softly, anxiety churning in her stomach. Maxwell turned, his eyes cold with barely restrained rage. "Someone leaked details of our marriage agreement to the press," he said bitterly, voice dangerously calm. "They know it started as a business arrangement. The tabloids are calling you a gold digger, and investors are already questioning my judgment. They're suggesting our marriage was simply a calculated move to secure my inheritance." Victoria's heart sank painfully, humiliation burning in her chest. The whispers, the gossip, everything she'd feared now crashed over her. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back quickly, determined not to appear weak. She rose slowly, forcing herself to remain composed despite her trembling knees. "I knew this might happen," she said softly, refusing to meet his gaze. "I'll understand if you need me to step away. I never wanted to damage your reputation, Maxwell." He crossed the room swiftly, gripping her shoulders firmly yet gently, forcing her to face him. "You're not going anywhere," he insisted fiercely, his voice low, thick with emotion. "I don't care what they say. The only reputation I'm concerned with is yours. I refuse to let them destroy what we have." Victoria looked up at him, heart pounding with hope and fear. "But the damage is done. People believe those lies." "Then we'll prove them wrong," Maxwell replied resolutely. His determination left no room for doubt, yet Victoria couldn't help feeling frightened. She had known from the beginning how precarious their arrangement was, but she never anticipated how much it would hurt to lose it. As the scandal deepened over the following days, Victoria felt increasingly isolated. Journalists camped outside their building, photographers stalking her every move, hoping to capture her looking upset or distressed. Each flash of a camera felt like a physical blow. The quiet happiness she'd felt mere days ago seemed distant, replaced by the heavy weight of public scorn. Meanwhile, Maxwell worked tirelessly, using every connection, every resource, to contain the damage, yet he couldn't fully shield her from the storm. Late one evening, alone in their penthouse while Maxwell met with lawyers, Victoria received a surprise visit from Claudia Greystone, the very woman who had humiliated her publicly. Claudia entered the apartment, eyes glittering with false sympathy. "Such a pity," Claudia mocked softly, moving slowly around the living room, observing the personal touches Victoria had added. "I suppose you knew it couldn't last. Why are you here?" Victoria asked, struggling to remain composed despite Claudia's obvious provocation. Claudia smiled coldly. "To offer advice. Leave Maxwell now, while you can. He'll tire of you eventually, he always does. You think you've changed him? You're just another woman blinded by his charm. When he's bored, you'll be discarded like the rest." Victoria swallowed hard, Claudia's words echoing her own secret fears. Yet she straightened her shoulders, meeting the woman's icy stare. "You don't know anything about our marriage," she said steadily, fighting to keep her voice calm. "What Maxwell and I have goes far beyond what you or anyone else can see." Claudia laughed cruelly. "Believe whatever makes you feel better, darling. But when this all falls apart, and it will, remember I warned you." With that, Claudia turned and left, her departure leaving Victoria shaken. Alone, Victoria sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, feeling helplessly torn between her fears and the genuine love she now realized she felt deeply for Maxwell. Hours later, when Maxwell returned home, he found her curled on the sofa, visibly shaken. Seeing her like that tore at his heart. He quickly approached, kneeling before her, eyes filled with concern. "Victoria, what happened?" "Claudia was here," she admitted softly, meeting his worried gaze. "She told me you'll eventually discard me, that I'm just temporary. Part of me wonders if she's right." Maxwell's expression darkened with quiet fury. "Claudia's wrong," he said firmly, his voice fierce, filled with absolute certainty. "I've spent my entire life viewing relationships as business deals, something disposable. But you changed that. From the moment I realized what you truly meant to me, I've been terrified of losing you. You're not temporary, Victoria. You're the only permanence I want." His passionate declaration melted away the last traces of her fear, and tears filled her eyes, this time from relief. "I want to believe you so badly, Maxwell." "Then trust me," he whispered urgently, his hand gently cupping her face. "Let me prove to you, and everyone else, that you're the only woman I'll ever love. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Victoria's heart soared at his words. They embraced tightly, finding strength in each other amidst the chaos swirling around them. The next day, Maxwell shocked the business world by announcing a press conference. Facing the media directly, he stood tall, composed yet openly defiant. "Yes," he declared boldly, his voice steady, unflinching, "our marriage began as a business arrangement. But I fell in love with Victoria long before our contract expired. She isn't my wife because of convenience or inheritance, she's my wife because I can't imagine a life without her. Anyone attacking her is attacking me, and I will protect her at all costs." His words resonated powerfully, silencing critics, and changing the narrative entirely. The world watched, astonished, as the cold, ruthless CEO openly chose love over reputation, vulnerability over pride. Victoria watched from the sidelines, heart overflowing with pride and love. That evening, returning to their penthouse hand in hand, Maxwell turned to Victoria, eyes bright with unwavering devotion. "From now on, no secrets, no contracts, just us. Real and honest." Victoria nodded, tears shimmering as she embraced him tightly. The battle had been painful, yet it had shown her something beautiful. Maxwell's love was genuine, fierce, and unbreakable. She finally allowed herself to fully trust in their future, believing at last that their love, once hidden beneath a cold contract, could weather any storm. In the aftermath of Maxwell's public confession, life became simultaneously easier and far more complicated for Victoria. On one hand, Maxwell's open declaration silenced many of the tabloids, turning the narrative from scandal to something that resembled a fairy tale romance. Their story, one of a ruthless billionaire unexpectedly falling for the woman he'd originally married out of convenience, captivated people. Yet the newfound attention also put Victoria under a harsher spotlight, one she hadn't anticipated. Now, each time she stepped out of their building, cameras clicked relentlessly, journalists shouting questions about her background, her family, and her past. It was overwhelming, draining, and at times, unbearable. Maxwell did everything in his power to shield her, doubling security and arranging for private entrances to events, but even his resources had limits. The world was fascinated by their love story, especially now that it no longer seemed manufactured. While Victoria tried to remain strong, each headline, each whispered gossip about her family's debts or her original motives chipped away at her confidence, reviving her insecurities about whether she truly belonged at Maxwell's side. Adding to the complexity, Victoria's brother Ethan's health took a sudden turn, forcing Maxwell and Victoria to make frequent visits to the hospital. Each time they arrived, they were followed by paparazzi determined to catch even the smallest glimpse of them. Victoria despised the intrusion into Ethan's privacy, deeply embarrassed to see her family's personal struggles splashed across headlines for public consumption. Yet Maxwell refused to let it shake him, standing protectively at her side, facing reporters' intrusive questions with his usual steely composure. One cold evening, after a particularly difficult hospital visit, Victoria and Maxwell returned to their penthouse exhausted and emotionally drained. As soon as they stepped through the door, Victoria sank onto the plush living room sofa, her head bowed, shoulders trembling with fatigue. Maxwell removed his coat, quietly approached, and gently placed a reassuring hand on her back, trying to soothe away her tension. "I'm sorry, Victoria," he murmured softly. "I never wanted you or your family to endure this." She turned toward him, eyes glistening with tears. "This isn't your fault," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I knew what I was agreeing to. But I never imagined it would feel this invasive. I knew people would talk, but not like this, not about Ethan." Maxwell sat beside her, gently pulling her close. "We'll get through this," he vowed, voice fierce with protective determination. "I promise you, whatever it takes, I won't let them break us." Victoria sighed softly, closing her eyes as she leaned into his comforting embrace. "I trust you, Maxwell. But how long can we keep fighting this? How long until the pressure becomes too much?" His jaw tightened, and his voice grew firm. "As long as it takes, Victoria. I'm used to battles, but I've never fought for something as important as you. You're worth every fight, every headline, every challenge." She raised her gaze to his, the quiet strength in his voice touching something deep inside her. In moments like this, she saw clearly how deeply Maxwell had changed, how love had transformed the powerful CEO into a man capable of tenderness and vulnerability. A warmth filled her heart as she reached up, gently cupping his cheek. "You're incredible," she whispered softly, eyes shining. "I never imagined feeling this way about anyone, especially you." Maxwell smiled gently, eyes softening with warmth. "Neither did I," he admitted quietly, voice thick with emotion. "But the moment you entered my life, Victoria, something shifted. For the first time, I want something beyond power, beyond wealth. I want a life, with you." Their quiet intimacy was abruptly interrupted by Maxwell's phone ringing sharply. He sighed, reluctantly answering it. Victoria watched the subtle changes in his expression, his eyes narrowing, voice clipped and tense as he spoke. When he finally ended the call, he turned toward her with a deep, troubled sigh. "That was my lawyer," Maxwell explained, voice strained. "The board has called an emergency meeting. Some shareholders, including Claudia's family, are questioning my decisions. They're accusing me of jeopardizing the company with this scandal. They're threatening to remove me as CEO." Victoria gasped softly, her heart squeezing with guilt. "Because of me?" she whispered, horrified. "No," Maxwell replied immediately, gripping her hands tightly. "This isn't your fault, Victoria. This was inevitable. They're using this scandal as an excuse to challenge my authority. But I won't let them take my company, or you, from me." A wave of fear washed over her. "What are you going to do?" Maxwell's expression hardened, cold determination flickering in his eyes. "Fight. And win." Over the next few days, Maxwell worked tirelessly, gathering allies, meeting privately with investors, and rallying the board. Victoria watched from the sidelines, terrified yet fiercely proud of his unwavering determination. At night, after exhausting battles in the boardroom, Maxwell returned home, always finding comfort in Victoria's presence. Their evenings became the sanctuary that protected them both from the ruthless storm raging around them. One night, as Maxwell lay awake beside her, staring up at the ceiling, he finally admitted the truth of his fears. "I might lose everything," he confessed softly, voice heavy with exhaustion. "Everything I've ever built is at stake." Victoria rolled onto her side, gently touching his cheek. "No matter what happens, you haven't lost me. You'll always have me. I didn't marry you for money, or for status, I stayed because I fell in love with the man you truly are." Maxwell drew her closer, breathing in her soft warmth, finding strength in her unwavering support. "You're the only thing that truly matters now," he murmured softly. "Let them take it all away. My empire, my power, none of it means anything without you." Days later, the board meeting arrived. Victoria waited nervously at home, pacing anxiously until Maxwell finally returned, visibly drained. He entered quietly, sinking onto the sofa, looking defeated. Her heart broke at the sight. "What happened?" she whispered fearfully, sitting beside him. Maxwell shook his head, staring blankly at his hands. "I fought for hours. I thought I'd lost. But at the last minute, several key investors backed me. I'm still CEO, but barely. They warned me that one more scandal could ruin me completely." Victoria released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Why did they change their minds?" He turned to face her, eyes deep with emotion. "They saw the way you stood by me through everything, Victoria. They believed in us, in the strength of our marriage. Ironically, our love saved me." Relief washed over her, tears shimmering as she held his face tenderly in her hands. "I told you, Maxwell. We're stronger together." He nodded slowly, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips, savoring the sweet warmth that only she provided. Their marriage, born from a calculated arrangement, had now proven itself stronger than any business deal, any scandal, or corporate threat. Victoria rested her head gently against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, knowing with certainty that nothing, not scandal, corporate plots, nor ruthless rivals, would ever truly separate them again. That I and the days following Maxwell's hard-fought victory in the boardroom, a strange new calm settled over their penthouse. It felt like the eye of the hurricane, peaceful, but undeniably temporary. Yet Victoria cherished this quiet respite, finally allowing herself to hope that the worst was behind them. For the first time since entering Maxwell's complicated world, she felt genuinely secure, held tight by the strong arms of the man she'd grown to love more deeply than she ever thought possible. Yet despite their newfound tranquility, both knew they couldn't ignore the dangers still lurking just beyond their private sanctuary. Maxwell had enemies, powerful rivals who hadn't forgiven him for choosing love over cold business sense. Victoria worried daily about another betrayal, another scandal, something that would once again shake the foundation they'd worked so hard to rebuild. Each morning, she'd scan news headlines anxiously, praying no fresh gossip emerged to threaten the fragile peace they'd found. Maxwell, however, remained determined to shield Victoria from any harm. More protective than ever, he quietly arranged heightened security measures and monitored the news closely for any hints of trouble. At night, after dinner, they'd sit close together, her head resting on his chest, listening as he quietly shared the day's challenges. These quiet evenings became their ritual, a rare space of honesty where Maxwell revealed fears and vulnerabilities he once would have kept hidden. With Victoria, he no longer needed to pretend to be the untouchable CEO who feared nothing. Yet, despite their closeness, Maxwell remained haunted by the threat that something would happen to Victoria. He knew he had many rivals, some capable of crossing ethical boundaries to achieve their goals. And one evening, while attending an exclusive private event at a luxury hotel, Maxwell's worst fears came to life. It was a prestigious charity auction, a gathering of the city's wealthiest elite. Maxwell and Victoria attended, determined to showcase their unity and dispel any lingering rumors. Victoria, radiant in a silver gown, stood proudly by Maxwell's side as he effortlessly charmed investors, philanthropists, and media figures. The evening went smoothly until Maxwell stepped away briefly to discuss potential collaborations with business associates, leaving Victoria chatting with a few other guests. She felt comfortable and safe until she turned to see a familiar, unwelcome figure approaching, Claudia Greystone, resplendent in an ostentatious black evening dress, a predatory smile playing on her perfectly painted lips. Victoria's stomach tightened instantly, sensing the threat hidden behind Claudia's calm facade. "You really do play your part perfectly, Victoria," Claudia sneered softly, careful to keep her voice low enough that no one else could overhear. "But how long can you keep this charade going?" Victoria forced herself to remain composed, chin raised defiantly despite the painful tremor that coursed through her. "There's no charade, Claudia. What Maxwell and I have is real, whether you believe it or not." Claudia laughed coldly. "Oh, darling, I'm sure you believe that. But everyone knows you're just temporary. One mistake, one slip-up, and he'll toss you aside without a second glance. After all, a man like Maxwell Montgomery never truly changes." Victoria struggled to remain composed, the hateful words sinking deep despite her resolve. But before she could respond, Claudia leaned even closer, whispering viciously into her ear, "I wonder how Maxwell will react when he learns your precious brother's treatment was funded by my father's company. You thought Maxwell saved him out of generosity? No, sweetheart, he just took advantage of another business deal. Your brother's recovery rests entirely in his hands. And if Maxwell tires of you, Ethan's fate might become uncertain." Victoria paled, her breath catching painfully. Claudia smiled cruelly, turning gracefully to disappear back into the crowd, leaving Victoria shaken to her core. Fear and uncertainty gnawed at her heart. Could Maxwell truly have hidden something like that from her? Was Ethan's life genuinely at stake because of their marriage? Maxwell returned to her side moments later, noticing immediately that something was wrong. His eyes darkened with worry as he gently touched her arm. "Victoria? Are you all right?" She nodded unconvincingly, fighting tears. "Claudia said something about Ethan," she whispered, voice trembling. "Tell me it's not true, Maxwell. Tell me my brother's recovery isn't dependent on you." Maxwell's face hardened with anger, not at Victoria, but at Claudia's malicious manipulation. He gently took her arm, guiding her swiftly away from the crowd, leading her to a private balcony where they could speak undisturbed. "Victoria, listen to me carefully," Maxwell said softly, cupping her face to force her to meet his sincere gaze. "Claudia twisted the truth to hurt you. Ethan's treatments were paid for up front. His doctors answer directly to me, yes, but his health is never at risk. I would never allow anyone, including me, to use Ethan as leverage. You have to believe me. Victoria desperately searched his eyes, wanting to believe him yet unable to silence her lingering fear. But Claudia said you'd discard me eventually, that I'm temporary to you. Maxwell's expression softened immediately. He drew her closer, eyes filled with unshakable resolve. I've never been more serious about anything, he whispered fiercely. I don't care what Claudia or anyone else thinks. My future, my heart, belongs to you now, Victoria. And nothing she says or does will change that. Relief washed over her, flooding her heart with warmth as she leaned heavily against him, seeking comfort in the strength of his embrace. But Victoria realized something vital in that moment. Their love was powerful, genuine, but it would forever be tested by the vicious world Maxwell inhabited. Her greatest fears might never fully vanish. To love Maxwell meant accepting the threats, the betrayals, the uncertainty that came with his wealth and power. Yet as she felt his protective arms tightening around her, she knew without a doubt that their bond was worth every risk. Let's go home, Maxwell murmured softly, his lips brushing tenderly over her temple. I won't let anyone hurt you or Ethan again. They left the glittering ballroom hand in hand, turning their backs on the whispers and hateful glances, returning to the sanctuary of their penthouse, away from prying eyes and cruel tongues. But even as Maxwell held Victoria protectively in his arms, staring out at the city skyline, he knew Claudia's threat was far from empty. More storms would inevitably come. More betrayals, more scandals, more ruthless attempts to break them apart. Yet, Maxwell also realized with unwavering clarity that Victoria had become his greatest strength, not his weakness. She had awakened something deep within him, a love worth fighting for, even worth risking everything for. No longer would he allow fear or doubt to dictate his choices. As he held Victoria close that night, he quietly resolved that no enemy, no betrayal, would ever destroy the bond they had forged together. Together, beneath the quiet, starlit city, they found new courage. Whatever storms still awaited them, they would face them together, united, stronger, and ready to protect the fragile, powerful love that neither had ever expected but which now defined every aspect of their shared existence. The sun rose gently over New York City on the morning of their first wedding anniversary, casting a soft golden glow through the curtains of Maxwell and Victoria's penthouse bedroom. Victoria lay awake beside her sleeping husband, silently watching him. Maxwell's features were calm in sleep, devoid of the tension and calculated strength he usually wore like armor. Here, in the soft light of morning, he looked vulnerable, peaceful, far removed from the formidable billionaire CEO the world knew. Victoria watched him quietly, her heart swelling with a tender, fierce love she had once believed impossible. Today was supposed to mark the end of their contractual marriage, but now the thought was inconceivable. They were no longer bound merely by contracts, but by something infinitely stronger, genuine, undeniable love. Maxwell stirred slightly, opening his eyes slowly. Meeting her gaze, a warm smile instantly curved his lips. "Good morning," he murmured softly, reaching out to draw her closer. "Why are you awake so early?" She smiled softly, leaning into his warmth. "I was just thinking," she admitted quietly, her voice filled with gentle emotion. "Today was supposed to be the end. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined feeling this way, about you, about us. And now the thought of leaving terrifies me." Maxwell's expression softened immediately, a tender smile curving his lips as he pulled her into a tight embrace. "There is no end for us, Victoria," he reassured firmly, voice gentle yet unshakably confident. "Our marriage started on paper, yes, but it became real the moment we opened our hearts to each other. As far as I'm concerned, the only thing ending today is that damn contract." She laughed softly, eyes glistening with tears as she nestled against his chest, savoring the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Are you sure, Maxwell? The world still expects us to be temporary. Everyone is watching, waiting to see how this ends." He cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his determined gaze. Then let's show them how wrong they are, he said firmly, his voice filled with passion. Let's show everyone that the ruthless CEO who married for convenience has truly, madly, fallen in love with his wife. Victoria's heart surged with joy, overwhelmed by the sincerity of his words. Maxwell brushed a tender kiss against her lips, sealing the promise that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. Later that evening, Maxwell had arranged an intimate celebration, a private renewal of their vows on the rooftop garden of their penthouse. The terrace had been beautifully decorated, candles flickered gently in glass lanterns, flowers bloomed everywhere, their delicate fragrance mingling softly with the cool evening air. Close friends, family, and Ethan, fully recovered and smiling brightly, gathered around them, their eyes shining with quiet admiration as the couple stood hand in hand beneath a softly illuminated arch of white roses. As Maxwell took Victoria's hands in his, their eyes locked, and the rest of the world seemed to disappear entirely. His voice was steady yet full of genuine emotion as he spoke. Victoria, when we first stood here a year ago, we promised nothing more than mutual respect and convenience. Today, I promise you everything else, my heart, my devotion, and my unwavering love. You've taught me how to be vulnerable, how to trust, and most importantly, how to love without fear. I vow never again to place business or pride before you. From this day forward, everything I have, everything I am, is yours. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling as she softly responded, Maxwell, before you, I was lost in a world filled with uncertainty. You taught me courage, gave me strength, and showed me that true love is possible, even in the most unexpected of places. Today I promise you my heart, my loyalty, and all my trust, for as long as we both live. As their vows ended, Maxwell leaned forward and captured her lips in a deep, passionate kiss, sealing their promises before those they cherished most. Friends and family applauded, openly moved by the intensity of their love. In that instant, the rumors, whispers, and skepticism vanished, replaced by something undeniably authentic. During the small reception afterward, Maxwell drew Victoria aside privately, guiding her gently toward a quiet balcony overlooking the city lights. Wrapping his arms securely around her, he pressed his forehead against hers, his voice tender and vulnerable. I have one more surprise for you. She looked up curiously, a smile tugging at her lips. What is it? He took a deep breath, gathering courage before revealing softly, I repurchased every share I lost during the inheritance conflict. Montgomery Enterprises is completely under my control again. But this time, I'm doing things differently. I'm rebranding the entire company under a new initiative, dedicated to medical research to find cures for diseases like Ethan's. It's a new beginning, Victoria, and it's because of you. Victoria stared at him, overwhelmed by his confession. You did this, for Ethan. Maxwell cupped her face tenderly, eyes serious and sincere. I did it for Ethan, for you, and for every family out there suffering like yours did. Because you showed me that love is far more powerful than business or profits. You changed everything. Victoria threw her arms around him, tears freely flowing down her cheeks. Maxwell, this means everything to me. He kissed her deeply, holding her close beneath the glow of city lights. For the first time in his life, Maxwell knew he had found true fulfillment, not in money, power, or influence, but in the woman who had quietly captured his heart. Together they stood, wrapped in each other's warmth, knowing they had conquered every obstacle meant to tear them apart. As the night wore on, the small celebration concluded, leaving Maxwell and Victoria alone once again. Returning to their penthouse, they walked hand in hand into their shared life, their shared future. Inside the quiet luxury of their home, Victoria turned toward Maxwell, eyes bright with genuine happiness. Are you ready for this? She asked softly, eyes sparkling with anticipation. Maxwell cupped her face tenderly, voice warm, sincere. Victoria, I've never been more ready for anything. You're my entire world now. Our marriage might have begun as a contract, but you've transformed it into something beautiful, powerful, and real. I promise to spend every day proving just how deeply I love you." She smiled, her heart soaring. "And I promise to love you, Maxwell, without conditions or hesitation, forever." Together, they stood in the silent elegance of their home, hearts beating in unison. Their love story had shocked everyone, defied every expectation, and blossomed beautifully in the face of adversity. From a contract marriage designed purely for convenience, Maxwell and Victoria had discovered the true meaning of love, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion. In each other's embrace, beneath the glittering lights of the city that once seemed so cold, they had found their perfect happiness. The past no longer mattered. Their future, now unbound by contracts or doubts, stretched ahead filled only with promise, proof that love could flourish even from the most unlikely beginnings.